Cool. All right, so we're going to talk about pasta-based modeling today. Our Lord and Savior, macaroni and cheese.
Ew, that's too up close and big.
It made me hungry instantly.
I know. I love mac and cheese, but it's like
Okay, so this is what I meant by like reference images. So you can download, JPEG or whatever on your computer, and just type in picture in the command line, and it allows you to just grab, something you have. So like this was a standing desk I was working on. Oh, oops, that was an unknown file type. So we'll rerun that. Yeah, so the mac and cheese one again. And then it just comes in like you can make it as big or as small as you want. And then it's basically a surface is what it is. That's what it comes in as anyways. But it's a really great thing to just import, an image if you're working from something, right? So you can have it in front of you. And you can use it to trace your curves on. So that's kind of where I started, right? So I used a control point curve, so these guys here, to trace out what I kind of felt like was kind of the center essence of the macaroni. So that tool is here on our left toolbar, and I'm using those anchor points to kind of just get that nice curvature that these have, and then I can grab that and just pull it off, right? So that's where I started, and I made a few different shapes. And I'm using going to utilize these in a ring design, right? So I needed to know for some next steps a few things. So we're kind of playing the chess game here. Like, okay, what do I need to do next to get this to work? So I measured my finger with some calipers just to get an idea of the diameter of it, right? And then I drew that in here. So I think my ring finger was 17.8 millimeters, roughly. Right? So that I utilized that curve here to create some other geometry. So I utilize the circumference of this to get a length. So I'm going to model things straight on a line, and then I'm going to use that distance to wrap them around that geometry. So I'm using controls to drive, I'm using curves to control and drive my geometry, the way it's going to look in the end. Okay? So this is where I started. So I use the circumference distance to draw my curve distance, right? So we're drawing a singular curve. I can click and say, okay, I want it to be 55.92. I just type that into my command line, hit enter. Hold shift to lock it in place, and then click, left click, and then right click to complete. So I've got my line. The circle is simple as well, so I just pick the center of my circle, and then I say either diameter or radius, so I can either punch in a radius or a diameter, and then I had, I think 17.08 or 17.8, I think was my finger. Right, so it can be very, very precise with this. All right. What I did from there, or what you could do from there, what one could do, is start to develop some geometry. So I'm utilizing a command in Rhino. So we're moving from 2D to 3D now. So we got our 3D macaroni noodle. This was kind of what I ended up with. I didn't make it completely hollow because I wanted it to be a bit stronger. And I didn't really know how that would cast either, you know, if I had it hollow. I didn't know, like, well, could the investment actually really get in there easily? Things like that. So I have my core curve still, right? This is what's making up the actual geometry. What I did is I took these points, so I started to manipulate them to get something like this, right? So inside there is a curve that I kind of took, you know, maybe I took a couple of these endpoints and selected them, and then used my gumball to kind of push them around. So I can take that and kind of manipulate the geometry. So that's kind of like more of a bent in 3D space now. It's not just on the XY plane, and kind of twisted it into the Z. And then, so core curve is manipulated using the gumball tool with control points. And then I utilized what's called the pipe tool to pipe this thing. So the pipe command, see if I can find one with still got the curve in it. Well, let's use this one. And that's like also the easiest way to make a ring too. Like if I pipe this, it lets me pick a diameter. So I can either do that by eye, or I can type that in, like, you know, 2 millimeters. And then I can say, okay, that's the only point I want, and it'll give me a complete solid. Or I can say, okay, that's my first, and then I can say, okay, that's, you know, I want another size, and then actually another size, and then another size. Right, so you start to get these like kind of bulbousy, really organic kinds of things. So a pipe's pretty useful in that way.
Pipe will that only generate a cylinder? You know what I mean, like
yeah, that's your cross.
A circle is always going to be the cross section.
Yeah.
With the pipe command.
Yeah, and we'll talk about how you can do this similar thing with any cross-sectional curve you have. So we'll get to that like near the end of this. So pipe I utilized to make the macaroni, and then I snapped these little spheres into each end just to kind of give it the illusion that it kind of goes into the shape, right? And then I used a Boolean difference command. So we didn't touch on Booleans yesterday at all, really. So Booleans will add, subtract, or take the intersection of objects. And those tools are here in this menu. And so you have Boolean union, Boolean difference, Boolean intersection, or Boolean split, Boolean two objects. We're using difference. Okay, so if I select that tool, it says select surfaces or polysurfaces to subtract from. So that's going to be my noodle, right? And then enter to continue. And then surfaces to subtract with are going to be my spheres. And then it asks me if I want to delete the input or save the input. So if I wanted to save those spheres, I would say no, please don't get rid of them. If I want to get rid of them, I just leave it as yes. So I didn't really feel like holding on to them, so I deleted them. Right? Oh, that's okay. So there we have our indents there for that. So I just used the basic solid to make that shape. And there's our macaroni. So the next thing I was working on is making a pasta-based jewelry. Is this kind of string of macaroni that I made here, the Mac Attack. So there's about 5 or 6 different macaroni in there, and I kind of rotated them around, using the gumball, and kind of shifted them in space so that they were intersecting each other. So these two shapes, the surfaces are kind of inside one another and their intersection. And I did that so I could make one closed solid polysurface. So I used the Boolean union. So I selected them all. So I selected all these shapes. And then I said, okay, perform a Boolean union. Well, we'll get into the command and then I'll do it. So click Boolean union. It says select surfaces of polysurface join. So you select whatever you're trying to get to stick together. And then and to get them to stick together, whether you're subtracting or adding, they have to be closed solids or closed polysurfaces. They can't be open. It doesn't work. It won't work. Then I click enter when done, or hit enter when done, and now these are closed solid polysurfaces. All right, so I've got singular closed solids, but I just made one big long string of them. Now I've got this like rope of stuff. I'm able to utilize that to make. I can use some commands. One of the commands is called flow to wrap that around this circle that I made. So this is my 17.8 millimeter circle. The command that I use is called flow. So the first thing it's asking us is to select objects. So we select those guys. Enter when done. Our base curve, so that curve that we made very early on, because I knew I would need it, this is the exact circumference of that circle. So select near one end. We'll select near this end. Okay, and then target curve near matching end. We're around a circle, so it doesn't really have a beginning or an end. So we'll just click it, and then we'll see what we do. And there, so it wraps it around. So, you can kind of, if you need to, you can kind of scale this a little bit with the gumball. I'm just holding shift to kind of scale it all at the same time to get it a little closer to that curve. If you are not so concerned about maintaining your geometry's integrity and you would like the software to warp it for you, you started to look more like penne. This is serious pasta-based modeling, guys. I don't know if you're no joke. All right. So you can utilize the software, the flow command. So I'm going to select these objects. These I don't have joined, but just as an example. So there's all these sub options in here, right? So when you're in these commands, I highly recommend pulling up the help menu, especially if it's one you've not used before, because it will explain all the sub-menu options for you. So what I had on the last one was please do not stretch these surfaces, no matter if the curve is too short or whatever, so that geometry stayed untouched. If I say, yeah, go ahead, let's stretch that stuff around, right? So I say yes, do the same thing, select the base curve, select the target curve, And now the software will warp that, right? So we can take a look at that without stretch. So it'll only go as far as the curve I have drawn here. Just kind of wraps it around that bit. Okay, cool. So, I mean, this would maybe be where I'd stop, but I said no. I feel like I can push pasta further. So I started to use the sweep command to generate some bands. So this is the same size circle here that I have. And I manipulated it with the gumball tool. So let me just pull one of these circles over here. Kind of show you what I did. So you can kind of see how this is undulating through space, right? It's not on a singular plane. And it's got, so this one has, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 control points. This has a whole bunch more. What I did and what works really well with circular objects is the rebuild command. So rebuild allows me to add control points, and it allows me to adjust the degree. So the degree is the fall off of the control point. So I can say either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think maybe is where it tops out, but that's how far out it starts to manipulate the curve. So like if I click one control point, it starts to manipulate the ones next to it. If I have like 3 selected maybe, right? So we'll say okay. So now I have all these control points around this curve. So I can grab the, come on, F10, there we go. So F10 is turning my control points on, so I should be able to grab one of these, right? And I can click on this arrow. If I just click on it, it gives me this dialog box and say, I want to move it in the Z. So I can use this to actually precisely move things. So I want to move it like 2. It pulls that control point up 2 millimeters, right? So if I wanted to move, you know, like these 2, so you can see how they're kind of connecting these other control points. And say, okay, I want to move this -2. Right? And that's how I kind of started to adjust my band. And I was going for this kind of optical illusion where it looks square in some views, or square-ish, but is actually a very much round object. Okay, so that's my base curve. So just dealing with a simple base curve again. And then I modeled what is essentially a cross-section of that ring. So I started out with an ellipse. Well, I started out with this curve right here. So just this singular base curve to give me like essentially whatever width of this band that I wanted, right? And then I added an ellipse. And let's see, what do I want to use? Yeah, we'll do ellipse from center, because I have this line. I know I have a midpoint, so I can click that. I can click the end here, and then I can kind of adjust this, right, to where I kind of feel good about that curvature. So I took that center line, and you can use a command called offset, or you can use a command, or you can copy it and pull it around. But I used a command called offset. So offset is kind of self-explanatory, but so it gives you, the main thing you want to look at is this distance, right? So, how far do I want this thing to move? It's like I had 0.55 typed in, I think, just because I liked that distance. It just looked good, right? But you can kind of type it in and it gives you a little preview. If you don't like it, you can click on it again. Say, actually, I want it here, whatever, right? Okay, so you have that curve, right? So we're just building this cross section. I have this curve. What I did over here with the bit that I offset is I used it to trim. So the trim command can either be, of course, typed in, or it's also right here on the left panel here. And of course, keeping your help menu up, always good. So the trim command allows me to select a cutting object, which could be this line, right? That's enter when done, and select objects to trim. So trim that. And then it just knocks that curve right back, so it's flush. I know those two are good to go. I can run that command again if I want. Go to trim. So now my cutting object is actually the band itself, and I want to trim back that line. Okay. So you could stop there, that's fine. But I decided to kind of refine it a little more. I put little fillets, right? You guys are probably familiar with fillets and chamfers and stuff, right? And that just gives that little bit of extra added precision or extra added polish. Right, so fillet, you can type that in. It's also in the curve menu. Curve, fillet curves. So it's asking me, okay, select first curve to fillet. Probably want to adjust that radius, that's huge. So we'll say, I don't know, 0.2 or something. So select that curve and then that curve. And you can see it gave it a little round. Do that again. Rerun fillet. Select this curve and that curve. And that gives it just a little bit of curvature. Okay, so this curve is now made up of several parts, right? Which is good for now. We want them all precisely touching end to end, right? They can't be overlapping or anything like that. It won't work. So we grab those sections and we want to join them. So that's a really easy one to spot. Looks like a puzzle piece. Oh God, you guys can't see that. Oh, why didn't someone tell me? Huh? I did not know. I mean, I knew, but I feel so bad now. That's the join button. I guess I should have looked at the screen.
I don't think it mattered much up until just now.
Okay. Yeah, sorry people that are watching this on video. Yeah, so unfortunately the projector has a different aspect ratio than my screen. Okay, so yeah. Anybody else have tools that I use that you were like, where'd your mouse go? No? Okay. All right, so that's join now. That's really important for the next step. That is, if I go to my properties menu with the rainbow donut, and I've got the closed curve, that's where I want to be. All right, so I can grab that, and you can either make a copy of it by doing Control-C, Control-V, just like most programs. And I like to do this with most things I do. I'll make a copy of whatever I've got, right? You can grab it, drag it, and just hit the Alt key, and it makes a copy wherever you tap the Alt key. All right, so I'm going to zoom selected, so I can kind of just be around that thing, and then I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, so I can hold Shift to lock that. So this is my cross-sectional curve, and this is my band. All right, so then I can move this from a midpoint to, not there. There we go. I want to be at a quadrant on the circle. So think of like the Cartesian coordinate system, right? It's broken up into 4 quadrants. So are circles. And you've got one at each pole, essentially, north, south, east, west. Okay, so that's what we got there. Now the command to make this thing a solid is sweep 1. So it's using what's called a rail. So this is our rail here. And then it's using what's called a cross section, which we just made, which is here. Press enter when done. Drag seam point to adjust. I mean, that looks good. I don't know what I would do to alter that, but hit enter. Say okay. And then that gives you, basically sweeps around that whole form. So that gives you a little bit more complex geometry to make bands out of, things like that. There is also a command called sweep 2, which I'll show you that one too in a minute. So from here, I kind of just started messing around with like some additional basic shapes and like adding some fillets around things. So if I wanted to do that, I would do a fillet edge right there. And then I can grab this guy and kind of adjust it to where I want it. Say okay. And then that just gives me a nice kind of smoothed over surface. Nice pedestal for my mac and cheese. And then I decided, well, does it need to be more obnoxious? Yeah, probably. Does it need to be even more obnoxious? 100%. And then I was like, well, can I be even more obnoxious? Yes. Yes, I can.
Oh, boy. We're going to have to cast this.
Yeah? Can we?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, yeah.
I was hoping you'd say that.
I'll say we can certainly try.
Okay, cool. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so like, okay, how did I get that text to do that? All right, well, it's a little complicated. It can be a little tricky, but I will show you what I did to get it to work. This legit took me like an hour and 45 minutes probably to like come to this. I went through like every permutation I could, because like I've done this before on really simple stuff, but I was like, can I get it to do this? And yes, you can. It's a little weird, but not really. So hopefully it'll make sense to you all when I'm explaining.
Putting text on a normal brain, that would be pretty straightforward.
It's Yes, in a way, yeah. I think it would actually involve a similar process. I guess I've only done this on like surfaces, but I was trying to get this to work on what is essentially a singular surface, but three-dimensional. Like it's wrapping, so like the way that this is made, this is a closed surface. It's not a poly surface. It is one singular surface. So it makes putting text on it super weird. Because you can only flow it on a surface. So if the whole thing is a singular surface, it wants to like, well, I'll show you. I'll show you what it did. It was weird. Okay, so first of all, you need a text object, number one. So this is our text object. You get that from this tool here. Okay. And you have a couple of options. We have a ton of options. You have a bunch of fonts you can use, of course, right? You have this interface that you can type into, right? So and then you have these options like, okay, do I want it to come out as curves, surfaces, or solids? For this particular operation, we want solids. So you say, okay, solids it is. All right. Well, let me just go back into that for a second. You also have thickness, right? And you have height. So you can control the height of your letters. These are like 1.25 millimeter or something like that. And then the thickness is 1.5 millimeters. That's what I use. But so you can say, okay, blah, blah. We take that, and for whatever reason, you have to flip it. So I just use the gumball. And flip that around. 180. Come on. That's messing with me. Hold on. There we go. All right. So once I did that, right, I created a surface around it, and I don't think I measured it out. I just created something to contain it, and it also has to be intersecting, right? So these shapes are intersecting each other. That way, when I wrap it, or when I flow it on that surface, it's flowing, but it's inset, right? So we can remove it from the object. So what I had to do, and this is where it got kind of weird. So I was trying for like ages to do this. So I had this set up. I was like, okay, let's flow along surface. So there's flow, which works with curves, and there's flow along surface, which sort of self-explanatory, works with surfaces. Okay, flow along surface. My base surface, whoops, hold on. Select objects to flow. So that's going to be your text or whatever you want to kind of flow on that surface. Hit enter. Your base surface, you want to select it. I found that the lower right-hand corner, which would be like the beginning of my text if it were flipped, was the one that worked. And then my target surface. Okay, this is what I was doing for like ever. You have all these like options. You're like copy, rigid, and I think I was like, yeah, rigid, no. I want it to like flow as best I can, and then I was like, okay, do the thing. you click, and the computer's like, oh, it's so hard. And then it was like, it was wrapping it. Like, the letters are there.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's there, but it's like, because that whole thing is a singular surface, it's like, okay, this is what you want me to do. And I was like, smashing my head against my computer, trying to like, I was like, what? How do I do this? And I was like, oh, I need to make my surface off of my ring, my band. So I took the band, the curve that I used to begin with. Now granted, this was like an hour and a half later. I'm like sweating, dehydrated, like my brain hurts. So I grabbed that, and then I also grabbed, I think it was like this curve here. I was like, okay, I'm going to use that because I think that's about the size. That's the size, the thickness of the band that I'm working with. So I grabbed that, and like this is my cross section now, right? Get this and move it to the quad, and then I sweep. Sweep one, select our rail, select a cross section, and then go. Okay, so yeah, it looks like I picked maybe a smaller curve or whatever, but yeah, that is I believe what I did. Yeah, and so the next thing that I did from here was I found that I had to actually divide that up, which was weird because I was getting a bunch of weird stuff on this too. So if I did the same thing, base surface, and then this surface. So it just wanted to go around like the entirety of it, and there was like no way to like contain it, right? Because it's just using that big of a surface. So I split it. So I split it like that. And now I do flow along surface. Oh, see, this time it ended up upside down. Yeah, it didn't do that last time. That's hilarious. So as you can see, it's kind of tricky, but let's see here. Maybe that actually did happen to me. So I think it even mattered, like, I think I know what I have to do. Let me try this one more time. Yeah, okay. So, all right. I think I figured out or remembered what the struggle was with too. I think it also matters, like, I'll show you guys. Okay, so selecting the base surface, I think it matters like whether I click here or here. You get me? Like, so I'm going to click on the bottom edge, and then I think I have to click on the bottom edge of this. Yeah, so that is what matters for this part. And that also, I think, took me a while to like it. Obviously, it took me a second to remember it just now. So did that make sense, what I just did? Say no, and I'll do it again.
It's a lot.
Okay, I'll do it again. No, I know it's a lot, but I wanted to show it to you because it's super cool, and like I think would be useful. And you can come back and watch this video as many times as you want, watch me struggle.
Yeah.
So, okay, so just to recap, what we've done is we have put out a text object that is a solid shape. We've intersected that with a surface, right? And it's backwards. Okay. Because we're essentially taking that text and like flipping it onto that surface. Okay. And we have taken the ring band curve that we had before. Doesn't matter if it's just a circle or a manipulated circle like I have. And then I've swept a line around it. Or you could probably even extend your curve out like that if you wanted to. Like with the gumball. I think that may have been what I did for this bit, but you can sweep it as well. And then you divide that into a section that you want your text to be on, okay? And I think the whole time I was doing this, I had moved this into the space. I had like moved that surface into the ring. So, yeah, so then it would project onto that surface into the ring. So let's just do that. As frustrating as this was, I was having a really good time. Okay, right, so to recap, we go flow along surface, select our objects, I missed some, oops, not you, yeah, you. Enter when done. So I'm selecting the base surface. Now remember, it matters where you click this. And that's what drove me crazy, I think, the most. But you click it along the bottom edge, okay, and then you come around and you make sure that you've also clicked the bottom edge of this. And there we go.
Nice.
There's our text wrapped around our ring. So then from here you would Boolean difference that. So hopefully we're intersected enough here. Let's get rid of that. And if I do Boolean difference, subtract from, subtract with, and then you get your indent along that surface. I know that's a lot, but it is all recorded, and I will post it up. You can watch it a bunch if this is something you're interested in. And of course, having issues, please come see me. Be happy to help you with your project. Does anybody have any questions on this stuff? Oh, I even lost the grad students. Oof.
They have their art history class at 2
okay.
o'clock. I know, they're like, we're out of here.
Yeah, can't
no,
stand
it stinks this semester there. They have a required art history class that's from 2 to 3:30.
That's a bummer.
Which is right in the middle of this class, so.
Yeah. Okay.
Which they're bummed out about too. Yeah, so I would recommend jumping in and working with piping, working with sweeping a rail, like creating a whatever, that sort of cross-section curve you want it to be. Moving into this next round of models, again, be sure tool is crazy helpful, depending on what you're trying to do. So.
Yeah. So Kelsey had a question about her objects, and she's trying to get these. We're using like 4, like one at each quadrant, basically. So she's trying to get these things evenly spaced around the ring, doing some addition and subtraction of objects. So array. So you can array things in a grid or around stuff or on a surface. But array polar. Select objects to array. I'm doing both of these. Enter when done. Center of polar array is going to be the center of my ring. Number of items, I want 4 total. Enter. And angle to fill or first reference point. I don't have to select anything if I want it to go 360 degrees. So I just hit enter again. And then it gives me a little preview. And you're like, okay, is that what I want? Yeah, that's what we want. Then we hit enter. So now I've got all of those in there. So Kelsey, the second part of Kelsey's problem was she wanted a hole through the ring, but she also wanted these tubes coming out of it. So we've made those objects, right? So if I turn on ghosted, you can kind of see how this is all constructed here. The tubes are intersecting the ring shape, and the cylinders are going all the way through the ring shape. So we go to Boolean difference. That's asking me select surfaces to subtract from, which is this guy, the ring shape, the ring form itself. Enter to continue, and subtract with are these guys. So I'm not involving the tubes at all right now. So we got that. So now I've got these 2 separate deals. So now I want a Boolean union. So that's that first button. And now it's asking me select all your surfaces or polysurfaces to union. So that's everything. Enter. Now when I select this, it is a closed solid polysurface. And that's a really printable object. That help, Kelsey? Okay.
And so, would you also use array for like file sections?
Yeah, if you wanted like a bunch of them, it's almost easier in your case to like copy and place them, but you can use array. So select objects to array. We just pick one of those. Enter. Number. Let's see. I gotta figure out which way I'm going here. I believe that is Y. That's X. So we're going in the Y direction. So number in X direction 0. Or okay, 1. Fine. Y direction we'll say 10. Z direction 1. I guess you can't have a 0 number. Enter. So Y spacing, so this is the distance between each object. So it's asking for a reference point, which I would probably choose, something here. Now it gives me my stack of objects.
Woo. It's cool that you can preview it.
Yeah, you get a little preview. So then you kind of do that. And then it's like enter to accept. I can adjust these if I want to. Let's say I want 15. You add some on, and you're like, that spacing's too weird. I want it to be, 6.25. Whoops. Minus. I am in the negative Y quadrant. Whoops. I just messed that up.
Yeah, that's the other thing that always mixes my brain is like X, Y, and Z. Just making sure that, Because I'll get switched around and I'm like looking at it one way and not realizing like I've lost those ordinates a little bit, so.
Yeah,
That's all that Rhino knows.
yeah, it's a Cartesian coordinate system. Yeah, there you go.
Eating your macaroni ring.
I know. What's up with that? Come on, man.
So Scott just did a way better job of explaining that than I would have.
So array
Thanks,
is
Haley.
like for multiples and like how you want to arrange them.
Yeah, so like array, so you've got polar, which is polar coordinates, and then you have normal array, or it's just array, and that does it in x, y, and z. So if I wanted like a 10 by 10 by 10, so this is my spacing now. And I've got this army. Hold on. Sorry.
So is that something how you did these that were printing earlier?
No, that is not actually how I did that, but similar idea.
And so you could take this chain, like your little macaroni chain, and wrap it around and bring chain right?
Do what now?
Like inner the tool that you use, but like how you made that little macaroni chain and then
Yeah.
wrap that into a ring, you can do the same thing with that chain.
Like array it? You mean?
Probably a different word you use.
Polar? Polar array? Yeah, I could probably. But it's not going to be. I use flow.
Yeah, that's what I was like.
Yeah, I use flow. Yeah, that's kind of the easier. Well, I mean, it's just more of a. It manipulates the object a little better. Yeah. Haley, is there anything else I should touch on that you think is valuable?
You know, I think these are actually I think this is really a great place to start. On the one hand, it feels, well, maybe it feels like kind of a small number of commands.
Yeah.
But I think within that, you can get really jiggy with it.
Yes, you can.
So, and remember, like, the goal. So what I want y'all to be doing, and I should reference the handout that Scott gave to you, 'cause I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's a couple commands in here I did not go over, but
Yeah, let's see what else is in here first.
I didn't go over sweep 2. I didn't go over some of the transform commands like splop and twist and maelstrom and bend. I could quick touch on those, but I don't want to.
Yeah, so part of it is I'm trying to also be sensitive to like what
Yeah.
our brains can hold.
Yeah.
What time is it? It's 3:15. Sorry, I'm just looking through the commands that. Oh, did you talk about trimming and splitting?
Oh God, I don't know if I did to
That's
the
a
whole
big
group.
one.
Yeah, I think maybe I did a little bit,
Okay.
but yeah, let's look at that. So I think I touched on that a little when I was talking about the construction
Yeah, you mentioned it.
of
but I
this
don't know.
curve, but let's do some stuff here. So my workspace isn't overloaded with bugs. Okay, yeah, I know what I'm gonna do. All right. So say we have, 25 millimeter circle, and we want to say copy that. So you could use the copy command if you want, and turn my snaps on. So I copy from the center to the quad, center to, come on, intersection. There we go. So we have something like that going on, right? And say I want that shape in the middle because I like it. So the trim command basically allows us to split curves accurately using other curves as cutting objects. So when I get into the command, I can grab it from my toolbar here. Of course, I can always, if I know the command, I can just type it in. I can select our cutting objects, which, you know, I usually kind of just select everything I'm working with. So I got a lot of options. And then I hit enter when done. And now say I want to just trim this away, you know, trim that. Don't know why that's there. And that. And we have this kind of leftover geometry. And, you know, maybe I like both of these shapes, right? So if I want to keep some stuff, I can use the split command. So I can type that in, or I can use here. So the trim kind of, the graphic is like, oh, you're cutting it away and it's going away. Split is like you're slicing it, but you're keeping all the parts. So if I go to split, there it is. And I use all my arcs. When done. Oh, yeah. Nope. So I guess it won't let me. So I'm going to use these two and split it with this one. There we go. Okay. So I was able to keep that. And then if I go back, select cutting objects, go split. Say I want to split these two. Oops. Objects to split, cutting object, and then I've got these two. And if I just want that little object, like say I really like just this part for like maybe a ring, maybe that's my cross section. Split this by these. So then I have all three of these curves. So just using some arcs, I got this kind of pretty neat set of objects, and I can join those. And you know, say I wanted to utilize that in a ring, I could use this as my cross section. Move it to quad, and then
It's gonna be weird looking.
yeah, oh, it's gonna get better. I'm gonna use 2 rails.
Oh, okay.
So we'll manipulate this a little bit more. So in space, I've got my center rail, and then I've got my external rail, and I've got my cross section. So if I go sweep 2, select first rail, second rail, cross section, enter.
So sweep 2 is when you have more than one like that.
Yeah, so I'm using those 2 rails to drive that cross section, so it's following them.
So they don't have to
Around.
be parallel.
Yeah.
So that can make it like bigger or thinner. It could fit into different dimensions depending on where those curves match up.
Yeah.
But that's sweep 2 versus just sweeping.
So yeah, so
sweep
you got
one just goes right around whatever the curve, whatever one curve is, it just matches that curve. But sweep 2, it'll use that as like a,
yeah.
just think of it as like a super messed up railroad tracks.
Yeah. So like you see,
Rails, yeah.
so you see that cross section there,
Yeah.
and how those curves are going, and then how that's generated in there. Yeah, that's what we're kind of looking at.
So one thing that I notice about how Scott is working versus how I tend to work, and this is there's no right or wrong answer here.
Oh, yeah.
But he's doing a lot of this in the perspective viewport. And within that, he's really relying heavily on the gumball tool. So that when he's moving things, even when he's in that perspective viewport, when he's using the X, Y, Z, like basically coordinates on that gumball tool, he knows still more or less which direction things are moving around in. And I don't use gumball that much. I usually am just plotting through the other 3 viewports, trying to like orient myself and make sure that I'm on the right plane or whatever. So if you can start out at the beginning, being a lot more used to the gumball function, I think that's going to serve you really well. But I just want to let everybody know, like that's when I'm watching, I'm like, oh, how does he know which direction he's pushing that when he's in perspective? It's like, oh, right, because of the gumball function, which you can turn on and off.
Yeah, it's down here. So if you hate it, you can get rid of it.
Yeah, so you can play with it. However, a lot of like what this comes down to is what makes sense in your brain and how you start to like understand the tools. And the only way to learn that is just by continuing to mess around with it and try and troubleshoot as much as possible. The only other thing I was going to say is I know for me, because I end up with workspaces that look a lot like this, I might have entire clusters of objects that I'm working with, or even within a single model, I might have like a subset of curves or something that I'm working with. I don't necessarily want to join them, or maybe they can't be joined, but maybe I want to group them so that I can move them out of the way or copy them as a group. So there's 2 different, like the join function and explode are different than the group and ungroup options.
Yeah, we can look at that
And
real
those
quick.
those are 2 that I don't think are on this list that Scott handed out, but I end up using groupings a lot.
You do those a lot? Yeah.
I
So,
do.
so like say I always wanted to move these as a unit.
And you don't want to worry about having to select all of them, or if there's something in there that might not always get selected. Sometimes if you click on something, it might not capture all of it.
Yeah, and it can be really, really super useful. It's not something I use a lot, but it does come in handy for sure. So your group objects, select objects to group. Get whatever you have there, press enter. Now when I select these, it's one unit. But they're not joined or booleaned or anything like that.
No, it's like grouping layers in Photoshop, or it's just a way to kind of like be like, okay, this is all together for now, and you can always ungroup it later.
Yeah, it's something to note though is if you group it and you group it and you group it, if you go to ungroup, it's still grouped.
Oh,
So you have to
like
ungroup it as many times as you group it.
That is good to know.
Yeah. There's been instances where I've been working with somebody's stuff and I'm like, what is going on? Like, oh, it's grouped.
Hopefully that wasn't one of mine.
No. And then, what did we say? Oh, explode.
Oh, just joining and exploding.
Yeah. So this is a poly surface. So it's made up of component surfaces, and they're all very accurately placed against each other. So it's a solid volume. I can explode that. So I have access to those component surfaces. So I can take this apart in its many pieces, right? So how I built this, like Hannah, how you watched me build this, is exactly how it comes apart. So depending on how you construct something, it will determine how it explodes.
Makes me like want to make an exploding reactor.
Yeah, like you can make some really cool digital drawings in Rhino. They can be really neat. So yeah, and then join. So if I wanted to join this, select objects to join. Well, first I have to move everything back together. I'll just undo that for brevity's sake. But say these are all component parts, and I know they're all touching and fit correctly. I could just grab all that and say join. And now it is a closed solid polysurface again. So that's explode and join. Anything else come to mind, Haley?
That's all of it.
Okay.
I just want to say I really love the main part. Like,
Yeah, once you get used to it, it's
like,
awesome.
like all the tools, it's just easy for everyone to name it.
Yeah. And the help menu is great, like if you're trying to search for something. Even if you know like the first letter of what you're trying to like, do, is like A. That's all the commands that start with A, So, does anybody else have any questions or like want to yell at me for teaching you Rhino? Would you say not yet? Oh, okay. All right. Well, when you have the need, let me know.
So similar, but a little more involved than what we did Tuesday in terms of homework is we actually want y'all to do the same thing basically, but again with this